In the mid-1970s, Swansea City was scraping the bottom of the barrel, fighting for re-election to the Football League. By the end of the decade, they found an energetic young player-manager to take them on a wild ride. These are the long-forgotten glory days of Swansea City.
I suppose the greatest day in the history of Swansea City. After 61 years in the league, they're in the First Division.
Let's bang out a quick history of football in Swansea. 1912, the Titanic sinks, but Swansea Town was formed. A year later, the Welsh Cup was sealed against Pontypridd at the first available opportunity. Once the Great War is out of the way and once the Football League bloats out to 3 professional divisions, the club finally gains admittance into the English Football League in 1920, following in the footsteps of other Welsh clubs Cardiff City and Newport County. Under the tenure of Joe Bradshaw, Swansea Town won promotion to the second tier with a win over Exeter in 1925. They continued to get routine chances at silverware in the Welsh Cup, which they are allowed to play in alongside the other Welsh teams who compete in the English leagues. And it is one of those that Swansea Town defeated in 1932's Welsh Cup final replay, Wrexham, long before Ryan Reynolds and Snoop Dogg had even been born to know what Wales or football was. The first half of the decade, despite talents like Ivor Allchurch and Mel Nurse, despite the goals of Jack Fowler and briefly Cyril Pearce, Swansea were in a seemingly perpetual cycle of bouncing between the second and third tiers. There were the heartbreakingly close defeats in FA Cup semi-finals, in 1926 to Bolton, despite dispatching Arsenal, and then in 1964 against Preston North End, despite being victorious over Bill Shankly's Liverpool. The following year, however, Swansea began their sharp descent into the 4th Division. This despite being named Swansea City in 1969 and despite being intertwined with 2 more Welsh Cup successes, one against a Welsh team playing in the English non-league, Bangor City, the other against an English team playing English League football, Chester City. And whilst Roy Bentley stemmed the tide, prompting the club's promotion back into the 3rd tier in 1970, by 1975, 3 years after his departure from the Vetchfield, the club bottomed out into 22nd place. Thus, they were landed in the perils of a potential demotion to non-league English football. With the League of Wales not around the corner until 1992, Swansea were only kept in professional football by their only ever re-election. They were forced to sell the Vetch to the City Council for 50 grand and were bailed out by a grant of £150,000, which helped significantly reduce the club's overdraft. Crowds as low as 1,400 saw the team now, with only 503 season tickets purchased by supporters ahead of the 1975-76 campaign. Harry Griffiths had just about kept the club afloat thereafter. After a mid-table consolidation in 76, an aborted promotion attempt followed before his resignation in February 1978 off the back of a home defeat to Darlington. He would serve underneath the new manager, but heartbreakingly for too brief an amount of time. Swansea had shopped around the managerial market and come out sucking their own thumbs. Eddie McCreadie turned the club down in favour of an offer to go to the States. Bill McGarry opted for the Newcastle United job, and even Newport's Colin Addison had rejected the Jacks. In the end, they settled on John Toshak as player-manager. As decisions go, it was left field to say the absolute least. 28 years of age, he was far and away the youngest manager of the Football League. It would also prove to be the club's most inspired decision yet. Toshak found the Swans in 5th place, not even the highest of the Welsh teams, but they did have games in hand on the nearby Newport, who were clinging on to the final promotion spot. It took a couple of games for Toshak's side to get going, but once March got into full swing, they got going. 4 wins on the spin before the ultimate display, a club record 8-0 hammering of Hartlepool United, Robbie James and Alan Curtis bagging themselves hat-tricks. Their latest win snatched the 4th promotion spot, no playoffs in these days, as 8 matches remained in the season. On the final straight, Swansea traded wins equally with losses, but they were nonetheless within touching distance of promotion. All that was needed was a win in the penultimate game against Scunthorpe United and favours from elsewhere. A day that would eventually be another step towards their eventual promotion quickly turned to tragedy when Harry Griffiths collapsed in the treatment room. A man who gave over 30 years of his life to the club had effectively died for the club at the Vetch. 4 days later, Swansea were promoted on the same ground with a win over Halifax Town. Brutally, football had to move on. The summer of 1978, a launch pad for the club. 3 years prior, they struggled to get an average of 2,000 turning up to the Vetch field. Come 1978, they had sold more than that in season tickets and had splashed 150 grand out on stadium improvements. Not only that, but they had broken their transfer record by bringing in Toshak's Liverpool pal Phil Borsma, as well as veterans Tommy Smith and Ian Callaghan. Alan Waddle also joined at one end of the pitch, Jeff Crudgington at the other end in net, before perhaps the most crucial signing was assistant manager Terry Medwin. In approach to their final match before Christmas, the Swans were embroiled in another promotion push. They'd applied for a return to the reserves leagues and the club was quite clearly healed. Whilst the first months of 79 bottomed the club out to 5th place, their loss at Lincoln on March 24th would be their last of the campaign. 6 wins and 5 draws from their next 11 games kept them in the promotion hunt and an incredibly tight-knit league. A win in their final match against Chesterfield would give them their best possible opportunity. Shrewsbury had won the previous night to get promoted. Swansea had to wait for news from elsewhere before they could celebrate, and then it arrived, packaged neatly from Hillsborough. Swindon had gone there and lost. Swansea were second division for the first time in 14 years. A fast-tracked rise from Division 4 to 2 in as many years was always going to be tough, but when the Jacks lost talisman Alan Curtis, it was going to be that much harder. Whilst they couldn't fill the Curtis void, his £400,000 sale was partly plugged by Dave Rushbury, Tommy Craig and John Mahoney. The wild ride Swansea had gone on had sped up the whirling dervish of transfers, Tommy Smith and Jeff Crudgington both departing before Division 2 could turn up. Whilst the Swansea public had let their imagination get away from them, almost expecting another rise into the top flight, outside of that fact that they had never risen to such heights, the fact that Toshak was barely 30, the fact that the club was on the verge of non-league less than 5 years later, it was totally unrealistic. The fact that the Jacks never really strayed from mid-table for the entirety of the season should be an achievement in of itself, especially after losing a star player. Don't feel sorry for Swansea though, they had continued to be active in the market. First came Wrexham's David Giles for 70 grand, before West Brom's Dave Stewart was acquired for the goal, and finally, towards the back end of the campaign, the soon-to-be jewel in the crown, Burnley's Leighton James. Swansea even dipped into the European market for Jamal Hadziabdzic from Velas Mostar. The club, now averaging over 10,000, was ready for the big time.
James, deflection off the wall and a goal. Robbie James. Big play by Swansea. Robbie James driven in. Charles came in. By Robinson, that would be awkward. James making ground. This is a good run. Good stop by the goalkeeper Carra. Can he get it in this time? Oh, I say he can.
Clearance dropping straight for Robinson. Oh, and it's gone in! Mahoney. Hadziabdzic, making space for himself. Well, what a superb goal that was! Don't commit himself here, and Curtis has got through the gap. Oh, and it's off the line, or was it? The referee has given the goal.
Toshak told supporters that it would take up to 10 games for the team to gel. By game 10, with only 2 defeats, his team were well in the promotion shake-up. That belief would only grow stronger with displays like the one at home to Newcastle in December. It was a result that confirmed the double over the great club, and as 1980 drew to a close, Swansea were encamped in the top 2. Promotion was on. Upon this fact, yet more reshuffling as Alan Waddle made way to Newport for the return of the great Alan Curtis. Even though the club had been subjected to 5 straight defeats, they only dropped to within 3 points of the automatics. Their return to the conversation, however, was brought on by wins at the Vetch against Bolton and Wrexham. A late March trip to Grimsby was an empty one, but it would be the last time that the Swans suffered a similar fate. That's where Derby are beaten at the baseball ground, and when Chelsea are not only beaten but thrashed. A further point at home to Luton set up a finale for the ages at Preston on the final day. They simply needed to match the result of their promotion rivals Blackburn, Luton, as well as Derby to go up. Toshak had decisions to make, perhaps the biggest of his managerial career thus far being the dropping of his captain John Mahoney, as Jeremy Charles returned up top and Tommy Craig was handed the armband. 19,000 at Deepdale, more than half of which had traipsed over from Swansea. Preston had beaten the Jacks 3-0 in the reverse. If that was replicated, the dream would be postponed.
So cleverly, Leighton James, it's there, and Robinson. Good skill, might try one. And can the goalkeeper stop it? He can't, it's Craig. It's under contend with, and they've come off best so far. Difficult one for the goalkeeper. Chance. Now Robbie James with space. Charles.
For the first time in their history, Swansea City were in the top flight. There were many who had been with them every step of the way. Robbie James and Jeremy Charles, as well as Wyndham Evans, from Division 4 right to the very top. In a world of 3 points for a win for the very first time, the club had to be bullish. They'd already shown as much in the transfer market: Everton's Bob Latchford, Wrexham's Dye Davies, and a staggering 350 grand on Liverpool's Colin Irwin. It should be noted that on his First Division journey, Swansea would be one of a few clubs who would be bestowed European football by virtue of winning the Welsh Cup 3 times on the spin. First against Hereford United upon their promotion in '81, before actual Welsh clubs Cardiff and Wrexham were beaten in the following years.
Fußballs. 4 Stationen beim 1:0. Freistoß Liebers, Altmann Schöne und platzierter Kopfball von Kinne. Der sieht Kinne. Und wieder Molt. Den Gästen gelangt zwar nach Fehler von René Müller noch der Anschlusstreffer durch Charles. Am Ende blieb der Tabellendritte der ersten englischen Division.
Swansea hadn't played in Europe since they had lost in the Cup Winners' Cup to Slavia Sofia in 1966, and it showed. They had yet to win a match on the continent, and that run continued. Whilst their European campaign had been culled at the very first hurdle, things back home weren't going too badly at all.
Well, choosing a beautiful, that's a lovely dummy, and it could be a goal, it is! Jeremy Charles scored it!
Well, from the end, they were roaring again. Alan Curtis to the pass to Grandin, Evans from 25 yards.
Ratchford heads back, James finishes with style.
Don't go thinking I'm cherry-picking these results. They beat the elite of Leeds, Spurs and Arsenal just as much as they had secured victories against Brighton, Sunderland and Stoke, all in advance of November. And whilst we could all celebrate those particular results, as Swansea sat in the lofty position of 4th, only 3 points off the Manchester United pace, and having played 2 fewer games too, Toshak's most impressive result arguably came in a draw to begin October. A trip to Anfield gave the former Liverpool frontman a chance to test himself not only against his former club but against the reigning European champions. It seemed only fitting that Toshak would be the first visiting Anfield manager after the death of his former manager Bill Shankly. If that result didn't prove that Swansea could hang in the new division, these ones could.
Looking for Latchford. Curtis, a good effort. What a brilliant goal.
Curtis, and it went, I think, through Bailey's legs.
And that's without being able to find you footage of Swansea's incredible victories over the reigning champions of England, Aston Villa, in December, and in the reverse game against Liverpool in February. By then, Toshak's side had become undeniable. After the brief wobble that was Christmas and New Year '82, what with its cup exit at home to Liverpool and defeats to Everton, Forest and fellow surprise title contenders Southampton, as well as Leeds, Swansea went again. They dropped just 4 points in 9 matches. Their win at Molineux had Swansea top of the league. They topped it for the first time in October and had led the league on Christmas Day. Not for 60 years had a Welsh club topped the English league. Toshak's side could realistically make history and do what Cardiff City couldn't do in the 1920s and win the thing.
Rimmer making the decoy run for him. Higgins at the back post to Sharp. Sharp can lay it up for Heath. Good goal.
They'd signed Ray Kennedy and Ian Walsh throughout the season, and it was just simply not enough come the end of the campaign for Swansea to win the league. An incredible thing to say given that less than a decade prior the club had nearly vanished into non-league. The apparently well signposted floundering in March against Ipswich and West Ham was apparently unrealised when the Swans' April rebound generated 10 points from 4 matches. It kept Swansea in the top 3 and only 6 points from the Liverpool summit. Their final 6 matches, however, generated just 3 points, all won away at the home of recent 2-time European champions Nottingham Forest on May the 8th. It meant a final resting place of 6th, a position well within the European places had Swansea not won the Welsh Cup anyway. They'd joined Spurs in the Cup Winners' Cup, but Toshak's side would be incredibly unfortunate to be one of the 4 teams drawn into the preliminary round. It's a massive shame that footage of the games against Braga, Swansea's first ever successful European tie, as well as the ridiculous 17-0 aggregate triumph over Maltese side Salima Wanderers, has been lost to history. Their last 16 tie against Paris Saint-Germain, however, does survive. Not the giants that they are today, particularly when Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Real Madrid and Inter Milan were all taking part in the same competition. There was a chance then that Swansea could actually win.
Grazie a questo gol del suo giocatore di colore Tocco che segna 20 minuti dalla fine, 25esimo.
Da Parigi per la vittoria del Paris Saint-Germain sui gallesi dello Swansea, che inizia l'azione, scambia con un compagno, si chiude bene il triangolo, raddoppio di Fernando.
By the time of this European exit, it was clear that this season wasn't going to go as well back home as it had done in the prior campaign. They got on hold of 4 wins so far, all at home and against teams like Coventry, Norwich, Spurs and Southampton, but they had been near useless on the road. Come their European exit, Swansea were just 1 point ahead of the drop. John Toshak had to briefly come out of retirement to sit on the bench since he was undergoing an injury crisis to the centre-half region. It had been a start to the campaign pocked by rumours that the manager had been earmarked to be Bob Paisley's successor up at Anfield since he had confirmed his retirement at the end of the 82-83 season. This can't have helped matters, nor was the Football League ruling that Swansea were unable to acquire any new players after defaulting on their transfer payments to Everton for Bob Latchford and Gary Stanley. With transfer debt still at £275,000, there was no excuse when the club had been boasting of season ticket revenue close to £500,000. Then there was Toshak's behaviour during the half-time in a September defeat to Watford that had him banned from the touchline until March 83. There was a loophole, however, and that was in naming himself as a substitute. Far from ideal, and so the season continued in the same vein.
He's still there, is Gibson, and a good cross, and here's Crooks.
On Christmas Day 81, Swansea stood atop English football. 12 months on, they were looking over their shoulder at relegation, a massive 18 points behind the leaders. The promotion of Ray Kennedy to captain had been an unmitigated disaster, marked by injury, terrible form and, in January, a suspension from the club and the eventual stripping of the armband. Whilst Robbie James was quickly handed the captaincy, his namesake, Leighton James, quietly departed on a free transfer. Terry Medwin had also gone, resigning in ill health, and his successor, former Swans manager Harry Gregg, returned to disastrous consequences when it was quickly apparent that he and Toshak didn't remotely see eye to eye. Then came the attempted exodus. Gary Stanley, partly because of Swansea's financial ills, was pimped out for just 30 grand as the club attempted to cash in on Bob Latchford as well for the measly sum of 100k. Neither move was made, nor were there any suitors for the banished Ray Kennedy. This turmoil manifested itself on the pitch as Swansea won just one game in the first 2 months of 1983, and before a triumph over Manchester City at the Vetch in March, they had sunk into the drop zone. An immediate 8 points from 4 matches took them above the dotted line on April the 2nd, but they were patently still in danger. Then came the onslaught, 5 shipped at home to West Ham, 3 more at Anfield as the Swans slid back into the relegation zone. A point at home to Stoke was a foothold, and then came Luton on the horizon.
Walsh gets into the middle for this one. Here's Walsh. Oh, fine goal! Donegan gets up. Walsh. Swansea keep going for one. It is a good header by Latchford.
This was rock bottom both figuratively and literally. With 4 games left, the Swans had 3 places and 7 points to make up. They scraped together 4 points from the next 2 games. Another win might have overhauled both Birmingham and Manchester City. In the end, defeat at Old Trafford in their next game confirmed the end of top-flight football at the Vetch Field. We will be back to Wales soon to visit other clubs, and this is the first in a 3-parter on Swansea City as part of our overall series this season to cover a wide range of British footballing stories from the past. All's covered in this playlist, check it out.